All right, good morning, everyone. I'm Sharon Wolf, MEUW Manager of Communications and Events. Want to thank you for joining us today. We may have others who'll join us, but out of respect for everyone's time, we'll go ahead and get started. I do want to confirm that this session is being recorded, so if folks could put themselves on mute until they have a question, that would be fantastic. We are really pleased to have Maria Lauk from Power System Engineering with us today to talk about federal grant opportunities that your municipal utilities may be able to take advantage of for upcoming projects. Maria has extensive knowledge in this area, so Maria, if you are ready, we can go ahead and get right to it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sharon, and welcome everybody. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And Sharon, if you could just confirm that you can see that. All right. Thank
Yes,
you.
sure can.
And like Sharon said, if you could put your lines on mute, that would be great. But if you have a question, I'd love to keep this as interactive as possible. So feel free to come off of mute and ask questions, and that would be great, because I always find that your questions are much more relative to the group than what I think I need to present. So feel free to interrupt. But in the meantime, for those of you who are unaware, PSC is an engineering organization. We have offices all over the Midwest. And we have started a grants group because, in addition to doing engineering services, we have found that with the IIJA, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, there's a lot of funding opportunities out there. And we work with a lot of utilities that they're nonprofits and they need help with the funding of a lot of their infrastructure, and the timing of the IIJA and the IRA are pretty well timed with the formation of our grants group. So I want to go over just a brief interview and introduction, and then do a relevance of some of these grants, and then talk about how do you prepare and what do you do when you're ready to go to or you're contemplating a grant application. So and by the way, you should have these materials available to you. If not yet, Sharon can post them or get them to you. So if you want to capture something in the slides or anything like that, we can certainly make these available to you if you haven't already. And this slide gives an idea of all of the grants, or just a taste of some of the grants that are out there. These are big money grants, and there's a lot to it. So we're going to focus on just the IIJA and the IRA for now, because those are the ones most affecting utilities. There was $65 billion in the IIJA, and in the Inflation Reduction Act, there were several tax advantages presented, as well as some forgivable loans. So we're going to talk about those throughout the session today. So I'm going to start with the IIJA. And remember, the J in the IIJA stands for jobs. Not only are they going to focus on the infrastructure funds that you need, they're going to talk about sustainability, reliability, and resilience. But the important thing to remember is that the current administration is very focused on jobs and community benefits. So we're going to keep talking about community benefits throughout this whole thing. And that's a challenge for a lot of utilities, because most of them understand infrastructure and they understand the technical portion of it, but the community benefits and the jobs is a little bit out of their area. Chances are you have somebody in your organization or somebody at your communities that definitely understands those things that you can loop into the grant. But be aware, it's not just, hey, I need new poles and wires, or I need a new transformer, new substation, whatever it is. Here's how much I need. Give me the money. There's a little bit more to it than that with the IIJA and the IRA.
I guess they're in the meeting at the shop. Hold on.
All righty. So let's talk about the first thing that's important is, what are your current goals and plans? There are a lot of grant opportunities out there, and of course I'll get to some of those, but
I can't hear Maria.
thank you. All right, I accidentally got muted there. Thank you for letting me know. So with the IIJA, what we want to know is, or what you want to think about is, what projects fit your goals? And then we find a grant for it, rather than hearing about a grant and then trying to find some project that will fit. So do you have modernization or AMI? Do you have distributions, reliability enhancements that you want to make, substation hardening, vegetation management, resiliency improvements, maybe AMI or DERM systems? There's all of these different options, but you want to have those stipulated up front. And then when the right grant comes along, then you can be ready to apply for a grant, because some of these turnarounds are relatively quickly, like with PACE, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. It came out last month and the submissions are already due. So if you don't already have your projects identified with budgets and perhaps some scope and some timelines, it's going to be really hard to get those things done in the timeline that these grants are being issued. So we'll talk about why that timing is so crazy. But the important thing to remember is, you want to have all of those details ready, but you don't want to start any projects. The grant, one of the main grant requirements is that the project cannot have started in order for you to qualify for a grant. So if you have a substation and you started pouring concrete and you started ordering transformers because you know there's a supply chain crunch and there's a long lead time and you wanted to get those started, I think it's great that you're doing great planning and you're trying to get ahead of that. But unfortunately, the grant company, the grant components in the federal government don't see it that way. And by turning dirt and ordering components, you've effectively disqualified yourself. So the other thing to think about with grants is what's the timeline? If you have a project that you want to do this year, I can tell you, at the speed that the government moves, a grant's not going to work for you. You're never going to get a grant applied for and approved, not at this level, in the same year. Most of the grants that we're looking at applying for now won't come to fruition until at least 24, which sometimes works with the supply chain. But be aware that if you've started a project in an effort to try to get ahead of it, that could be problematic. So this is a really busy slide. And again, you can, you'll have the slides that you can look at, but this is our attempt to outline all of the components of just the IIJA that impact utilities. So there are resiliency investments, there's smart grid, there's cyber. NEVI stands for the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure. Broadband, some utilities are getting into broadband, so we mentioned that. Of course, some of them run hydros. So there's a whole lot out there. The nice thing with the IIJA is it's a 5-year plan. So if you see something that you like and the plan comes out, and I'm going to talk about one that was due this week, and you say, wow, I would have really liked that grant. Too bad I missed it. Well, there will be another opportunity next year, and that gives you plenty of time to kind of plan and map out your strategy. So I want to talk about the Justice 40 initiative. I'm not sure how many people have heard of it. If you have, I'm sorry if this is a bit redundant, but a lot of folks don't realize that one of the efforts of that community benefit is the Justice 40 community, where the federal government is striving to target 40% of the federal funds and grant funds to targeted areas. So what I have here are disadvantaged communities and energy communities. Energy communities are communities that have been impacted by coal plant retirements. So obviously on the Mississippi River where the lot of plants have been closed, you can see there. And of course, some in closer to the middle or northern sections of the state. And then on this side are disadvantaged and distressed communities. Different grants will target different areas and have different requirements. These are all available on the internet through maps, where you can either type in your address or your community and you can figure out, are you a Justice 40 community? Are you a distressed community? And is that relevant to the grant that you are applying for? So these links, when you get the slides, are effective. So you can always click on those and check those out. So the feds have some really big dollars out there. But one of the things that I want to focus on, especially for some of the smaller communities on this call today, is what are some of the smaller dollars, right? The feds, when they talk about giving $100 million grants, and I'll show some things later, it's really hard for one municipality to come up with $100 million worth of projects. That's just not going to happen. But maybe there's 20 communities that can get together and they each have $3 or $4 million and that builds it up to 80, perhaps that's a better fit. But if you're not ready for that, if you say, you know what, I just need like $100,000 for a particular project, then perhaps some of these funding opportunities might work for you. In Wisconsin, the rural and remote are fixed grants for renewable energies. So if you tell me that you wanted a community solar project or you want to build your own small wind farm just for your community, maybe the rural and remote will work for you. It's a zero match grant. They'll pay for the whole thing. Of course, it's due this week, so it's a little bit late, but next year, if you came up with a plan, those are smaller grants that the feds are saying is a simplified process because it's a smaller dollars for them and it's fixed amounts. Maybe that fits with a plan that you have. If not, maybe there's opportunities in resilience. I'll talk a little bit more about the state grant for resilience, comes through the DOE. Talk a little bit about EPA has now some funding as well. Of course, the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin has some energy innovation grants. They have community block grants. A lot of different opportunities out there. It's just a matter of, again, what aligns best with your plans. So, to give you an idea of the size of some of these grants, these are some of the major sections of the DOE's IIJA. And the ones over on the right, the Smart Grid and the Innovative Regional, these are really big grants. These are $120 to $100 million grants, right? Really large. General Resilience, same thing. The amounts are the 5-year allotments. So if they have $2.5 billion over 5 years, obviously it's $500 million a year. The catch though is in 22, where the program was supposed to start, they didn't give any money away. So 22 and 23 are a little bit bigger allotments because they're effectively playing catch up. But again, they will have more in 24, 25, and 26. So these are really big grants that invite a consortium type approach where many communities get together. And we've worked with different associations. We worked in another state with several different utilities that were much smaller than would normally apply to a federal grant. But together, we found 25 million in need. And by putting that together and submitting a federal grant, that gave all of these small municipalities in this state an opportunity to participate in the Smart Grid grant. We submitted that in March, and just to give you an idea of the timing, we worked on that all spring. We submitted it in March. We haven't heard anything on the response to that, nor do we expect to by the fall. If they do call and say, hey, you guys got the grant, how would you like to proceed? Then the award negotiation process will take most of the fall into the winter. And again, they can't start these projects until the awards are actually granted. So these efforts aren't going to start until 2024. So there's a lot of folks in these communities that have been waiting to initiate some of these smart grid options. But they're really stuck to where they can't. So be aware. There are some opportunities with funding, but there's also some limitations. So there's some frustration there. So these big grants are, 20 to 100 million. When we start to get into the rural resilience and the federal state allocated money, the state formula grants, those are a little bit more on par with perhaps something that some communities on this call might be interested in. So rural and small communities, the definition of a small community is less than 10,000 people. And then for state utilities, for states to the utilities, those, remember, the state grants, they're going to be open to everybody. So we'll talk a little bit about where Wisconsin is in the process and how that impacts you and what the timing is for that. Okay, so we're just a little bit into this, but it's a whole lot to kind of take in. So I just want to stop here and see if there are any questions, or I'm not seeing any hands raised, but I think Sharon, you can help me if there's anything in the chat or any hands being raised, anything or any questions so far.
I'm not seeing anything just yet, Maria.
All right, well, there will be other opportunities, but thank you. So here's the state application, the 40101D. This is just a part of the IIJA that allocated money. And here are the dollar amounts, right? These are annual dollar amounts. So in the state of Wisconsin, they got 5.1 million. Again, because nothing got allocated in 22, not through anybody's fault other than the DOE just didn't get the money out. You'll find in this process that the DOE, like everybody else, is constrained for resources. So they're having a lot of difficulty making sure that they can keep up with all of these allocations. So in 2023, Wisconsin will effectively have double this 5.1 million. So they'll have 10.2 million. In June, the DOE came out and said the Wisconsin's state plan that they submitted on how they're going to allocate this 10 million was approved. So soon we're going to see a FOA. A FOA is a funding opportunity announcement from the state. So the state gets their update in June saying, hey, you're approved, start moving forward. And then the state starts to get ready. They release their FOA to utilities, and this is going to be open to for-profits, nonprofits, IOUs, munis, co-ops, distribution, generation. Everybody is available to participate in this. And what they'll do is offer grants for, this is specifically targeting resilience. So with resilience, we're talking about substation hardening, vegetation management, perhaps undergrounding. Perhaps you have some AMI systems that can contribute to resiliency. It doesn't touch too much on renewable installations, but we're waiting for the Wisconsin funding opportunity announcement to see. But if you're a small community or a small utility, it's a 66% match. So that means you bring a third to the table, they bring the other 2/3. And if you were to apply for something, let's say this year in 23, and you got an award announcement either towards the end of this year or early next year, you would have 5 years to implement that. So if you're concerned about supply chain or project management opportunities, or having enough workforce to handle some of these projects, 5 years should give you enough time to get these projects done. Just keep in mind, they can't be projects that have started, and they also can't be projects that you submitted to another grant. So if you said, oh yeah, I did something on the IRA and the substation A was submitted in that project, you subsequently cannot submit that for another grant. However, if you did submit for substation A to be rebuilt and it got rejected, in future years, you can submit that project again to others, but you can't simultaneously submit the same project to multiple grant opportunities. Again,
Maria, I believe we
yes.
have a question.
Oh, yes.
Dean, if you'd like to ask your question.
Yes, I was just curious on when you say a match for small utility, what's considered a small utility?
A small utility for the IIJA is less than 4 million megawatt hours of annual sales.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Yeah, so that's a great question because a small utility is different than a small community. So it depends on which grant you're going for, when you qualify for small. Most of the folks on this call will qualify as a small utility, but you may not qualify as a small population if you have more than that 10,000 population. Any other, I see another hand up. And
Hi.
Anna, yes.
Yeah, thanks for answering the question. I'm wondering for small utilities, if several small utilities partner together and combined are larger than the load amount you referenced, whether they can still qualify for that small utility match.
So if several small utilities got together and submitted for a federal DOE grant, they would still be considered small and they would get the 66% match. I don't know what Wisconsin would do if several small utilities got together and tried to submit to their 40101D, because I haven't seen the FOA yet. But quite frankly, with Wisconsin, I think it would be probably best for each individual community or municipality to submit by themselves, because Wisconsin's going to handle smaller grants, right? They're going to be 30, 50,000, maybe 100,000. But if you wanted to submit to like a big grant to those federal ones like we were talking about, and I'll show again here in a minute, you would still retain your small utility status.
Thank you.
Any other questions? See any hands? All right. So with the 40101D, just stay tuned. The state should be coming out with something soon. They should be communicating to the utilities, and then we'll talk a little bit more later about if they did come out with a FOA, how do you get prepared for that? Not only do you want your project details and community details, there's a couple of other just small technicalities that you want to apply, that you want to get resolved. So from a timeline perspective, the rural and remote, just like we talked about, those concept papers and utility applications are due soon. When I talk about concept papers or LOIs, letters of interest, letters of intent, depending on which it is, most of these applications are requiring a two-step approach. They're asking for a concept paper or pre-application first before you submit a full application. And the reason that they do that is they're trying to limit the amount of time you invest in these things. Some of these applications can be quite complicated and take a lot of energy and resources. And some organizations have hired outside consultants like PSC, which of course costs money. And so if you're trying to mitigate your financial impact, what a lot of the either the DOE or the USDA both are asking for pre-applications. You do that pre-applications, it's kind of a simplified process saying, hey, here's what I want to do, here's my ideas. And then after the pre-application window is closed, they get back to you and say, hey, this is a good idea, why don't you proceed? Or, you know what, this would not be the best investment of your time, and perhaps you should just stop investing anything in this project right now. It's just to give you some feedback. It doesn't mean that the project's not good, it just may not fit the qualifications for the grant. So if you see concept papers, pre-applications, things like that, that is the intermediate step. It is done prior to an application, but it is a prerequisite for the application. So if you miss a concept paper or pre-application window and you say, oh yeah, the pre-application window is closed, but I'll just apply when the big application window opens, that's not an option. They'll usually say, please show us or demonstrate your concept paper or pre-application information. So we're sitting here, of course, just at the beginning of the third quarter. Earlier this year, we saw the federal resilience, innovative regional and smart grid grants go through. Those were submitted, and then they're still in this white space here. That's when the DOE is reviewing them. In the fall, we're expecting those award negotiations. Parallel to those negotiation awards, this process will start all over again. So in the here in the third quarter, fourth quarter for innovative regional, smart grid, and federal, we expect to go through the same process again. Concept papers, applications, and then consideration into the 24 years. And again, folks who apply for this, when they do get their award, they have 5 years to get these projects done. So the GRIP program is the Grid Resiliency Innovation Partnership, large consortium that have applied. And I know the APPA is thinking about or contemplating how can they help municipalities organize and get some of these larger grants to more municipalities rather than having a small group say, we're not going to ask for 25 million. It's just not realistic. So this will keep repeating year after year. Rural and remote, the pre-applications are due today. And then of course, those who are invited to apply will go through the utility application. And again, that repeats every year. So just to give you kind of an idea of the length of time that those go. So, here, what I did, I created this slide for a different presentation that I did where there were some utility regulators on the call. And what I wanted to point out here is the DOE has got, they put this right in the FOA, like for grid resilience. They said they were going to give away 10 federal awards, and they had $900 million to give away, which, you know, pretty easy math. Each one is going to be 90 million, just to give people an idea of how massive these applications are. It's going to be really hard for 1 or 2 municipalities to apply for a grid resilience grant. Smart grid grants, same thing. They're going to give away more of them, 25 to 40 of them. But when you have $1 billion to give away, that's a minimum of $25 million grant. That's a lot of money. And these grants are 50-50 share. So if you ask for 25 million, that means you've got to come up with 12 million yourself. Again, a consortium is a great application for this. So maybe this summer in Wisconsin, as different communities are talking, you think, hey, maybe there's an opportunity here for us to get together and we all want to apply for a smart grid grant. And you are not bound by state lines. So if there's somebody in the UP or somebody over in Michigan, or it doesn't even have to be a neighboring state, but if there's areas where you can collaborate, those are definite opportunities to start applying for some of these larger grants. Grid resilience, these are the really big ones. They're only going to give away literally a handful. Here, 250 million was the goal. And so this is applied for by the state. So Dee, yes, you got a question.
So are you saying then that, let's say if we were looking for AMI, to put in an AMI system, and let's just say it's a $600,000 project and they're going to do 66%, we would have to go in with other people to even be considered for a grant for this? That they're not going to give out $400,000 to a small utility separately? Am I understanding that right?
Okay, 2 things I want to clarify. The 66% match is on the resilience. Smart grids just happen to be at 50-50. So if you had in your example, you said a $600,000 grant, or excuse me, $600,000 project, right?
Yep.
You would have to bring 300,000 to the table, and hypothetically, the feds would bring 300,000 to the table. The problem though is the feds aren't even going to read your application because they don't want to deal with anything that small. But if there were, let's say, 20 of you, each with $600,000, and you start to get up into 12, maybe 10, 12, 15 million, that's going to be a little bit more attention getting for them. But the feds, of course, like everybody, are resource constrained. They want to keep these prizes and these awards big, really big. So my recommendation is to work with other municipalities or co-ops or whatever you decide to work with, just to get the award size big enough to get a federal DOE official to look at it. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. And Casey.
Yeah, thank you. I got a couple of questions. First, are you going to provide the contact information for which concept papers should be submitted? You know, like the department or any type of email address, anything like that, so we know where to send these concept papers to?
Sure, that's a great question. Most of these applications are submitted, excuse me, concept papers and applications both are submitted through a portal called grants.gov. And
Okay.
I'll talk a little bit about how to register for that, because in lieu of an email, they have a portal that allows you to kind of track your process and make sure that you have all of the documents that you need to submit in one place.
Okay, so that might answer my second question. I'm just wondering if there's some type of outline, you know, that'll tell you what kind of information you should include in these
Yep.
concept papers.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So traditionally in the FOAs, and this is what we're waiting for from Wisconsin, the funding opportunity announcement will delineate, okay, you need to submit whatever, a financial document, community benefits document, and a technical document. Or you need to submit your financials and a project outline or something to that effect. Those are all delineated in the FOA. Yep, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Anything else? All right. So the reason I wanted to share these is just to show, even on the original rural and remote, which was supposed to be for communities of 10,000 or less, they were looking at giving out 4 awards for $1 million, which is great, but that's only 4, and this is federal. And then they were like, well, we'll give out 3 to 20 that are between $2 and $100 million. Again, these are supposed to be for small communities. How is a small community going to work and network with someone else to find $100 million worth of projects? There's a lot of frustration that the DOE, I understand they have resource constraints, but you can't say you're going to give out federal money and then make the prizes so large that effectively nobody's going to be able to come up with those things. So there was some frustration there. So Nick, you have a question?
Yeah, could you clarify or define, you stated a couple times about starting a project. Clearly, we are a utility that are looking at a voltage conversion. Over the last 10 years, we have been replacing transformers to dual voltage, but not in excess to get us to where we need to be. And we would like to follow through with this, get all of our transformers replaced, dual voltage for this voltage conversion. Would that be considered starting the project?
Well, quite frankly, it depends on how you define the project, right? So if you said, we want to do this voltage conversion, you effectively started. However, what I would recommend is if you wanted to apply for a grant that says, if you started, it doesn't qualify, I would break it up into phases. So perhaps you have, the northern side of town or the western side of town done, or you have, residential versus commercial transformers done. If you could break it up somehow, I would submit it as, yeah, we've started the project on one side of town, but we still have these other phases. And because those haven't been started, they would still qualify. So it depends on how you define or outline your project.
Sounds good, makes sense.
Sure. Anything else? All right, so that's a lot about the IIJA, a lot of opportunities, and I'll show you at the end of here a couple of websites that you can look at that from the DOE that just shows, all right, what's out there? Where do I look at these fellows? And grants.gov is a big part of that. So next I want to talk about the IRA, again, the Inflation Reduction Act. Just recently, the IRA, the IRA is more recent. It was approved last year, and that is parallel to the IIJA. The IRA doesn't really have dollar figures assigned with it like the IIJA has their $65 billion, because the IRA is a lot more about forgivable loans, tax incentives, and financial opportunities that it's really hard to quantify how much it's worth, but it is going to make a significant increase in interest in renewables and a lot of different energy sources. So the PACE program is the Powering Affordable Clean Energy. These are actually funded programs through the USDA, through RUS funding. So even if you're not an RUS borrower, you can still qualify for these. And of course, most of the communities on here are considered rural, or if you serve a rural territory, that's really what PACE is trying to target. So what they're looking at is giving out $1 billion in forgivable loans with 20 to 40% forgiveness. And then they are mostly to make clean energy investments and for projects between $1 million and $100 million. So the timeline for PACE is they have this LOI, the letter of interest. The window is currently open, and they will be evaluating that through September. They're going to keep reading those until they run out of money or run out of time. And then if you are invited to apply, if your LOI is received and acknowledged and encouraged to apply, you only have 60 days to apply. So this is one of those where it really helps to already have a plan formulated, costs identified, because not only do you only have 60 days to apply, but all these projects need to be done by 2031. So I know that's longer than 5 years, but some of these renewable projects, when you talk about acquisition of land, interconnection, maybe agreements with your G&T about how you're going to interconnect, those all take a lot of time. So this PACE program opens up some opportunities, but it's only a one-shot deal. So the RUS has said they're only going to do this once, unlike IIJA, which is going to come up over year after year. And it's going to have some limitations, but it does create some opportunities. So for PACE, it's going to go to fund renewable energy systems, obviously solar and wind, things like that, zero emissions and energy storage. So battery systems and things like that. It is for both rural and non-rural, but they are asking that 50% be defined as rural, and rural is a population of under 20,000. So I know that we talked about the DOE saying 10,000 was a small community. USDA and RUS have a different definition. Their rural population is under 20,000. They are looking at loan forgiveness, and they are also targeting some of these disadvantaged and energy communities to impact the interest rate on your on your RUS loans and how much is going to be forgivable. So for example, in PACE, there are some eligible participants. Is a really big group, right? It is even IOUs, but municipalities and cooperatives, nonprofits in the tribes. For example, in PACE, if you were near a tribal area and you put in renewable energy, if it served the tribal community at 60%, at 50 to 60% levels, you could have 60% forgiveness of the loan. So real easy math. You have $1 million installation, and it serves a tribal area. which of course is considered disadvantaged, and the RUS gives you a loan, after you build that and complete it, rather than paying off $1 million, they would forgive 60% of that, and you'd only have to pay 40%, which of course is $400,000. And then there are tax benefits on top of that. So the application window for that is now through September. And here's how the production tax credit, excuse me, investment tax credits work. It used to be that a lot of municipalities and cooperatives, the nonprofits, always partnered with a third-party developer because tax credits for an organization that doesn't pay taxes doesn't provide a lot of value. It's like, who cares? However, with the communities now allowed to participate in these tax credits, you can monetize tax credits. So when you file your 990, you get a registration of a renewable project, and the IRS basically cuts you a check. So rather than having a tax credit on a tax form that you don't fill out, on the 990s, you submit your registration and you can have cash flow provided by owning your own renewables. So this is obviously driving a lot of interest because people that have not normally participated in the process due to tax constraints are now opening up. So if you get even a 20% forgiveness on PACE because you're serving a small community and you have your ITC, your investment tax credits, depending on how you invest and how you build your renewable, you can get a lot of forgiveness and a lot of tax credits to where you can reduce the cost of this renewable to a fraction. So in this particular case, if you get 85% of it covered, 20% through forgiveness and 65% through investment tax credits, that's quite a bit, right? And I'm sorry, this should be 80. Should be 20 and then another 60. You get 80%. Obviously, that $1 million project now only costs you $200,000. So there is a lot of interest in PACE. And these are much smaller, $1 million to 100 million. I mean, 100 million is big, but $1 million when you start getting into renewable systems and things like that, it's pretty easy to get into $1 million. And even though that's a big chunk for a community to take on with tax credits and PACE forgivable loans, it might put it within reach of your organization. So are there any questions on PACE? And again, there are lots of websites that I'll work with Sharon after this to make sure that there are website opportunities because I don't have them built into this, but I'll get you the website links for PACE, for DOE, and for Wisconsin. So here is just a kind of an overview of how the PACE funding, and even if you don't get PACE funding, if you did start to put renewables into your area, how the ITC works. If you think you want to do this, you definitely want to work with the IRS and make sure that the tax credits qualify. You check with the IRS before you proceed, because once you start the project, you're going to get a registration number. Each project needs its own registration number. Those registration numbers are used on your 990T form to claim the elective pay. The elective pay is what's effectively going to create, for lack of a better term, a tax refund. You're going to get money back from the Treasury. Those registration forms, I sort of equate those to like when you have dependents. Dependents need social security numbers. Each project is going to need a registration number in order to fill out the appropriate paperwork that provides you revenue from your investment in these renewables. And as you build your renewables, you want to make sure that your accounting and your project costs and everything are accurate, because as always, there's potential penalties if the IRS believes that the project doesn't really qualify, or if it's too excessively expensive. Of course, there's opportunities for penalties, but we're more interested in let's make sure that the IRS gets your registration number ahead of time and that you qualify and that everything's above board so that as you do your planning on how much this is going to cost, you understand the tax implications as well as the cash flow implications.
Maria, this is Sharon. Just want to do a time check. There's so much good info here. We want to make sure we
Yes.
get to. We have about 15 minutes left.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
And so one of the things you'll see in the slides is there's a lot more slides that I'm going to go over. And the reason I leave those slides is just for reference material. So, Sharon, thank you for the reminder. Yeah, I'm looking at the clock too, because I'm going to go over disadvantaged communities. I'm going to go over the EPA, and then we'll wrap it up and see if there are questions. But in the slides, there's a little bit more information that I will not be covering here. It's just more for reference in case people want some details on resilience and cybersecurity and things like that. So if you think about, all right, so what's a distressed community? What's a disadvantaged community? Does that mean I have to be in like an urban area like Milwaukee or Minneapolis? Is that what it means to be a disadvantaged community? Disadvantaged and distressed are based on many different factors. It could be on the standard of living, access to transportation, energy costs, unemployment, affordable housing. There's 36 different things that impact it. So you can see on the left here, we have disadvantaged communities in blue. So you can see all through Wisconsin, there's disadvantaged. And the green is distressed. Again, sometimes they overlap, sometimes they don't. And again, it depends on which grant you're looking at. If you're looking at DOE, they use disadvantaged. If you look at the USDA, they look at both disadvantaged and distressed, as well as energy communities. Those energy communities, while they do have some priority areas, again, they have those energy communities that were impacted because of coal plant closures. So there's a lot of opportunity here. And if you target those areas, disadvantaged, distressed, and energy, then the loan forgiveness on PACE goes up. So lots of opportunities there. So the last grant opportunity that has just come out, and this is more for your awareness, just so again, that's so that you can think about it. The EPA wants to get into funding solar. EPA has indicated that even though the eligible applicants involve a whole lot, they've said they're going to have 56 awards. 56 awards feels a lot like it's going to be given to 50 states and the 6 principalities of the United States. I listened to an EPA webinar yesterday, and it sounds like that's what they're going to do. I reached out to the state of Wisconsin to see if they were going to apply. And indeed, the Economic Development Corporation will be submitting an application to the EPA. So what this will do is this will create funding opportunities for things like rooftop solar and community solar. So if your community has always wanted community solar, this may be an opportunity to get in on some funding opportunities, because this is 100%. So if you have a $200,000 community solar project, you could potentially apply to the state. After the state applies, and if they get approved, just like the 401(d), they could come out with a FOA saying, who wants community solar? Now, community solar and rooftop solar, this is specifically for disadvantaged communities. Their definition of disadvantaged may be different. So we'll wait for the funding opportunity announcement. But again, you want to kind of get your ducks in a row ahead of time, that if you have some impoverished areas or you have some folks with limited financial resources that are reaching out for rooftop solar, this may be an opportunity for them. The DOE is very interested in working with the USDA and the EPA on making sure that a lot of these grants are kind of well distributed. So some of those slides that I won't be going over but are in there for your reference are the rural, remote, smart grid, cybersecurity, lots of things out of the IIJA. But how can you get ready, right? So earlier it was asked, you know, how do I get this? What do I do with this paperwork? I have an application. How do I submit it? The first thing that you want to do, if you even think that you're going to apply for any kind of grant, is get a SAM.gov. SAM stands for System for Award Management. SAM.gov will allow you to register for something called a UEI. A UEI is a unique entity identification number. I tell people it's effectively the same as having a social security number when you file your taxes. If you don't have one, you can't file. So if you don't have a UEI, you can't file for some of these, just about all of these grants. Even on the state level, it sounds like they're going to require everybody to go to UEI. USDA programs, if you want to participate in anything, including REAP, you need to get a UEI. I would love to say it's a simple process that you can apply and get an account just like that. You can't. It is a very lengthy process. Maybe your communities already have a UEI. If so, that's great. If not, make sure that somebody gets a SAM.gov account, get a UEI. Once you have that UEI, then you can establish a grants.gov account, and that creates access to the portals to where you can start to apply for different grants. And grants.gov also has a great search function to where you can start to look for grants, have them send you notifications on the updates of those grants and how to apply for them. There's also a new portal that the Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations, the OCED, is creating an exchange account. That is another portal that you may want to register for. That one is super easy to set up and will allow you to apply for some of this funding as well. Make sure you have your information. You can register for updates, and in the application process, just make sure you have your data, right? What's the community benefit? What's the budget? What's the plan? The scope? The timeline, all of those things, so that when you have an LOI or concept paper opportunity come up, you're ready to go. Again, you can apply as your own utility, or you can work through an association or through a consortium. Sometimes those bigger dollar numbers are a little bit more favorable in the eyes of the DOE. USDA and the EPA, state, those are, the jury is still out as to whether how big they're going to want them or if they'll handle individual applications. So that is what I have. I know it's a lot of information, which is why there's always a struggle between making folks aware and overwhelming. But we have a few minutes if there's any questions. And of course, my email is there. You can contact me after. But any questions? And Sharon, I don't see a chat or anything like that, so I didn't know if that was running as well.
We did put a link to the presentation in the chat, so folks have that. So if you haven't noticed that yet, please take a look at that. I've also added it to linked it at the events page where the details from this webinar were posted on the MEUW website. So that's another place where folks can grab it because, like you said, Maria, there just is a ton of information in there for everyone.
Yeah, it's crazy. I just want to show folks, it's pretty simple. Some of these applications that they have, they're all ESRI based, but like this one, you go to the distressed and disadvantaged communities, you can zoom in on your area and you can type in different addresses, and the apps right now are really, really helpful in understanding, do I even have a distressed area in my community, right? And sometimes it's partial and sometimes it's not, but if you've got one, I say, put it on the ground, let folks know, because that's one of the goals, is to get money to some of those communities that have been adversely impacted for whatever reason.
Great.
And then Sharon, if I send you some more, links, I'll work with you on that to make sure, because there are things like, the PACE has got, I'm sorry, I was sharing again. PACE has got some great information out there on, how do you apply and what are the requirements, overviews, lots of links. PACE has got it, DOE's got it. Hopefully soon, this is the grid resilience where Wisconsin has made their announcements. So lots of links and lots of information out there, but it is kind of overwhelming.
Great, yeah, we can definitely add the links to the information that we're sharing via that events page, so thank you for that.
Of course.
Great.
Last round of last call, I guess, for any questions.
Great, we'll seeing none at the moment. Sometimes it's hard to know what to ask, but
Right.
again, thank you so much, Maria, for your
Yes.
time and for all the really great information, and thanks to folks for attending. And hope everyone has a really great and productive day.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, take care.